They called her the diversity hire. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood on the flight deck of the USS Ronald Reagan, and she knew exactly what they thought of her. She was the landing signal officer, the LSO, the person responsible for guiding every aircraft safely back to the carrier. It was a position that required split-second decisions, perfect judgment, and the trust of every pilot in the air. But Sarah Mitchell had none of that trust. Not yet. "Try not to crash any of my birds today, Mitchell," Lieutenant Marcus Webb said as he passed her on the deck. He said it with a smile, but Sarah heard what he really meant. "You don't belong here." In the ready room, pilots made jokes. "Guess we're landing with training wheels today." They didn't bother to lower their voices. They wanted her to hear. Sarah said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence cut deeper than words. But what none of them knew was that Sarah Mitchell had earned this position, not through politics, not through quotas, through pain. 6 months ago, everything had been different. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had been in the cockpit of an FA-18 Super Hornet, the smell of jet fuel sharp in her lungs, the thunder of the catapult beneath her, that split second before launch when your stomach drops and the world narrows to a single point of focus. She'd logged over 2,000 hours, carrier landings in storms that tossed the deck like a toy, night operations where the only reference was a tiny row of lights in an ocean of black, combat missions over Syria where every second could be your last. Then came the accident. The approach had felt normal, line-up good, glide slope steady, but the arresting gear failed. Her Super Hornet slammed into the deck at full speed. The sound of twisting metal, the searing pain in her leg, the taste of blood in her mouth. When Sarah woke in the medical bay, she knew. The way the doctors looked at her, the careful way they spoke. "You'll never fly combat again." 5 words, her entire identity shattered. Sarah had been a pilot since she was 8 years old, watching her father's old carrier landing videos. He'd flown off carriers in Korea, back when LSOs used actual paddles and there were no computers to save you. Every pilot trusted the LSO with their life, he told her once, his hand on her shoulder. No automation then, just paddles and duts and the belief that the man on the platform would bring you home. So when Sarah couldn't fly anymore, she'd done the only thing that made sense. If she couldn't bring herself home, she'd bring everyone else home. She'd become an LSO. But the fleet hadn't seen dedication. They'd seen a diversity hire, a wounded pilot given a desk job, a political statement from Washington. On the bridge of the Reagan, Admiral James Brennan watched the flight deck through the windows. He was old Navy, 58 years old, 36 years of service. He'd seen sailors die. He'd made the calls that cost lives and saved them. And he didn't believe women belonged in combat leadership. "Keep an eye on Mitchell," he told Webb quietly. "I don't want incidents because someone in D.C. wanted to check a box." Outside the bridge, Sarah heard every word through the open hatch. She kept walking, face neutral, hands steady. She'd heard worse. At 0600 hours, Operation Pacific Thunder began. 90 aircraft, 60 FA-18 Super Hornets, 20 E-18G Growlers, E-2 Hawkeyes, all launching within 2 hours for the largest coordinated strike mission the Reagan had launched in 5 years. Sarah stood on the LSO platform and watched them go, one by one. Catapults firing, aircraft screaming into the sky. She knew what they were feeling right now, the adrenaline, the focus, the freedom. She envied them, but she had her own job to do. 4 hours later, the first radio call came. "Reagan, this is Alpha Strike. Mission complete, requesting recovery." Webb's voice from the tower. "Roger, Alpha Strike. Begin approach. Weather is clear, deck is ready." Sarah took her position, paddles in hand, ready. And then the world went dark. The explosion wasn't loud, not on the flight deck, but Sarah felt it through the steel beneath her feet, a deep shudder that ran through the entire ship. Then, nothing. And then, every light went out. The USS Ronald Reagan, 100,000 tons of American naval power, went completely dead in the water. On the bridge, chaos. "Status!" Admiral Brennan's voice cut through the confusion. The chief engineer's voice crackled over emergency radio. "Catastrophic reactor failure, sir. Emergency shutdown. All primary power is gone." "Backup generators?" "Failed to engage. Minimum 6 hours to restore power, Admiral." Webb's face drained of color. "Sir, we have 90 aircraft inbound. They'll be overhead in 45 minutes." Brennan felt ice in his stomach. "How much fuel do they have?" "About an hour total, some less." "Divert them. Send them to Guam." Webb was already calculating, his hands shaking on the display table. "Guam is 200 miles, sir. They'll never make it. Not all of them." His voice cracked. "We could lose 30, 40 pilots." The bridge went silent. The kind of silence that comes when men realize they're facing a nightmare with no good options. And that's when a voice spoke from the doorway. "Sir, there's another option." Everyone turned. Sarah Mitchell stood in the entrance to the Combat Information Center. Her face was calm, her voice steady. "We can land them, manually, the old way." Webb stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Without power, without arresting gear, without lights? Mitchell, that's impossible." "No, so it's not." Sarah stepped forward. Before automation, LSOs guided aircraft with paddles and hand signals. Visual approach. Pilots followed commands. "My father did it in Korea. It can be done." Admiral Brennan studied her face. "You're talking about landing 90 modern jet aircraft in the dark on a dead carrier deck using hand signals." "Yes, sir." "That's not a recovery operation. That's a suicide mission." Sarah met his eyes. "Diverting them is the suicide mission, Admiral. At least this way, they have a chance." Webb shook his head. "These aren't propeller planes from the 40s. These are FA-18s coming in at 140 knots. One mistake and they go into the ocean." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "I've flown them. I know exactly how they handle on approach. I know what the pilots are feeling right now, and I know I can bring them home." Admiral Brennan was silent. He looked at the flight status board. 90 aircraft, 40 minutes of fuel remaining. He looked at Sarah Mitchell, the diversity hire, the wounded pilot, the woman he'd dismissed. "Mitchell, if you're wrong, we lose 90 pilots." Sarah's voice didn't waver. "If we do nothing, we lose them anyway, sir." 5 seconds of silence that felt like an eternity. Then, "Do it. Mitchell has the deck."
The next 15 minutes were controlled chaos. Deck crew scrambled to place chemical flares along the landing area, creating a makeshift runway of ghostly green and red light. Battery-powered spotlights were positioned, emergency radios tested, and Sarah Mitchell stood at the LSO platform, paddles in her hands, looking out at the dark ocean. Somewhere out there, 90 aircraft were burning fuel, circling, waiting. She keyed her radio. "All aircraft, this is LSO Mitchell." Her voice went out over the emergency frequency. "We've lost primary power. We're conducting manual recovery operations. Visual approach only. You will follow my commands exactly." Silence on the radio. Then voices, confused, scared. "Manual recovery? What does that mean? How are we supposed to land with no lights? We're dead! We're all dead!" Sarah's voice cut through the panic like a knife. "Listen to me. I was one of you. I know what you're feeling right now. I know the fear, but I also know how to bring you home. You're going to trust me. You're going to follow my voice, and you're going to land safely. All 90 of you." Another silence. Then a voice Sarah recognized. Commander Jake Morrison, one of the pilots who'd called her the diversity hire. "Mitchell, are you sure about this?" Sarah looked out at the darkness. She thought about her father, the old videos, the pilots who trusted LSOs with nothing but paddles and faith. "I'm sure, Morrison. Now let's bring you home." The first aircraft appeared as a distant set of lights against the night sky. Sarah lifted her paddles. Alpha 1, I have you visual. You're right of center line. Correct left. The pilot's voice was tight with tension. Roger, correcting. You're low. Add power. The aircraft climbed. Easy. Too much. Reduce power. Sarah's world collapsed to a single point. The approaching aircraft, the movement of her paddles. Everything else disappeared. The doubt, the fear, the politics. There was only the plane and the deck, and the absolute certainty in her hands. Lineup is good. You're on glide slope. Hold what you've got. The F-18 descended. 200 yards. 100. Looking good, Alpha 1. Stay with me. 50 yards. Easy. Easy. 20 yards. Tut. Sarah dropped both paddles, the signal to cut power. The F-18 slammed onto the deck. Without arresting gear, it rolled forward into the emergency netting at the far end. The aircraft stopped. Sarah keyed her radio. Alpha 1 is aboard. Welcome home, Morrison. On the bridge, Admiral Brennan released a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Webb whispered, 89 to go. For the next hour, Sarah Mitchell performed a miracle. Aircraft after aircraft, her arms screamed with pain from holding the paddles. Sweat poured down her face despite the cold night air. Her voice went hoarse from constant radio calls. Some approaches were perfect. Some she had to wave off, sending the plane around for another try when the lineup wasn't right. Wave off, wave off. Alpha 6, you're too high. Come around. Roger, waving off. One pilot panicked halfway through the approach. I can't see the deck. Mitchell, I can't see anything. Sarah's voice stayed absolutely calm. You don't need to see the deck, Alpha 12. Look at my paddles. Don't look at anything else. I'm your runway. I'm your reference. Trust me. I can't. Yes, you can. You've done this 1,000 times. It's the same. Nothing has changed except the lights. The deck is still there. I'm still here, and I will bring you home. A pause. Then, I'm with you. Power. Hold it. Closer. On glide slope. You're doing great. 30 yards. Easy. Easy. 20 yards. Cut! The F-18 dropped onto the deck, rolled into the netting, stopped. And as it stopped, the engine coughed and died, out of fuel. But the pilot was safe. All 90 were safe. Sarah Mitchell lowered her paddles for the last time. Her arms felt like lead. Her legs were shaking. She could barely stand. And then she heard footsteps behind her, dozens of them. She turned. The pilots were emerging from their aircraft, climbing down the ladders, walking across the deck toward her. They formed a line, and one by one they came to attention and saluted. No words, just respect. Commander Morrison was first, the one who'd made the tokes, the one who'd called her the diversity hire. He saluted, and when Sarah returned it, he said quietly, I was wrong about you, Commander. Dead wrong. Sarah nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. That wasn't just a job. That was... I don't have words for what that was. The other pilots saluted in turn. Some had tears on their faces. Some couldn't meet her eyes. But every single one of them understood. She had saved their lives. Admiral Brennan walked down to the flight deck. The sky was turning gray with dawn. He found Sarah standing alone by the LSO platform, still holding her paddles. Commander Mitchell. She turned, came to attention. Sir? Brennan looked at her for a long moment. This was the finest piece of seamanship I have witnessed in my entire career. Thank you, sir. I owe you an apology. The words came hard. Admirals didn't apologize. I judged you before you'd done anything. I saw a diversity hire, a political appointment. I didn't see a naval officer. He reached up and unpinned something from his uniform, a small pin, worn gold wings faded with age. These belonged to my LSO when I was a pilot in Vietnam. Chief Warrant Officer Mike Reeves, best LSO the Navy ever had. He saved my life twice. Before he died, he told me to give these to someone who truly earned them." He stepped forward and pinned them onto Sarah's flight suit. "You earned them tonight, Commander. 90 pilots are alive because of you. Their families will see them again. That's what these wings mean. That's what you are." Sarah's eyes were wet. She blinked hard. He continued quietly, "You just wanted to bring them home. I know, but you did more than that. You reminded us what a naval officer really is, what courage really looks like." Sarah looked out at the flight deck. 90 aircraft, silent now, but safe. "Permission to return to duty, sir." Brennan smiled. "Granted, Commander." 3 days later, when power was restored and the Reagan was underway again, the story had already spread throughout the fleet. The female LSO who landed 90 aircraft in the dark, by hand, with paddles, the old way. Some people called it impossible. Some called it a miracle. But the pilots who were there called it something else. They called it the night they learned that skill has no gender, that courage requires no prerequisites, and that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who saves everyone's life. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell returned to her duties. The jokes stopped. The dismissive comments ended. The whispers about diversity hires faded away, because 90 pilots had trusted her with their lives, and she had brought every single one of them home.